At the beginning with the tornado, this was before we were in lockdown. It was 3 blocks from my house, and it was terrifying. And then that night was terrifying. And I woke up and I drove down the road, and just the destruction. I mean, it looks like the end of the world. It looks like bombs went off. Everything is just destroyed. Trees are uprooted. Steeples came off churches. I mean, it's just, you can't even understand it with your naked eye. Like, I was just walking in total shock of like, I just ate there last night. I get my coffee at this place. This is where I go to brunch, every weekend. And the beautiful thing about all of that was the community rose to the occasion. And then we got hit with Corona, and it was weird because it's like I'm driving down my streets and it looks like the end of the world. And now collectively, energetically on the planet, it feels like the end of the world. And so that messes with your head.
I'm Katie.
I'm Anna.
She's a psychotherapist.
And she runs a photography empire. Together we make music and we podcast
To encourage ourselves
and you
to do the things that scare us most.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Doing Scary Things podcast. Thanks so much for joining us for another episode. If you're new around here, welcome and thanks for coming. If you've been around here a while, welcome and thanks for coming back. We love having each and every one of you on this journey with us. Today, we're sharing a conversation that Katie and I had with Mary Hyatt. She's a life and mindset coach and host of the Living Fully Alive podcast. We had the good fortune to speak with Mary very recently, and our conversation was so timely considering all that's going on in our collective world right now. It was such a real and meaningful conversation. Katie and I both teared up a couple of times as we recorded it. We seriously can't thank Mary enough for being with us this week. Remember, friends, we're all in it together, and none of us is really alone. We hope you enjoyed this candid conversation. Here's Mary.
I am Mary Hyatt, Southern as the day is long, y'all. Live in Nashville. And I'm really proud of that because in Nashville, not many people can say they're from Nashville. And I am. I'm like born and raised. And that comes with so many lovely little nuances to it that I'm still recovering from, but here we are. And I am a life and mindset coach, and my kind of primary, I should say the people that I love to work with are just amazing female entrepreneurs who are kind of figuring out how to create this balance between masculine energy, sort of that go, go, go achievement, sort of that old model of like the corporate world of women have to be like men to succeed. And then meeting that with this beautiful tempering of how do I access my intuition? How do I access that energy of flow, that kind of gut feeling, that knowing, that ability to rely on my relational skills to create a thriving business and a thriving life, and how to bring that together in harmony where some individual can go from being asleep at the wheel, burnt out, coping, medicating in all different ways, to living a life where they're fully alive and they are turned on for life and they are able to live from a place of intuition and joy. And so I spend a lot of my time working with my one-on-one clients. I have a Facebook, or I shouldn't say Facebook Live show anymore. I used to have that. Now it's an actual legit podcast, which is exciting. And y'all know how much work goes into that. So it's very like pat on the back. We've done it.
Yes.
And then I do, all kinds of things in between, guided meditations and just really anything that I can do to help invite women into this kind of intuition that I feel like is innate in all of us and bringing us back home to our highest selves, professionally and personally.
I love that. And I just have to say, as someone who is always on the social media struggle bus, like love, hate social media, I love your social media. Your environment is so warm and comfortable and like approachable and beautiful and valuable content. Like it's the greatest. So if anybody hasn't Follow Mary
thank
on
you.
Instagram. Oh my gosh, do it. It's just like, it's one of the things that anytime I see something from your page in my feed, I'm like, yes.
Yeah.
And that is rare. That is so rare.
Well, I think that came out of like a genuine hate for social media as well.
Yes,
you know, and it's
right?
like, okay, how can I actually offer something that I would want to look at and read and that's true and not about the ego and image as best I can, you know, as obviously we're all human, but like,
medium.
I'm so,
exactly.
Right.
Yeah,
so thank you.
That really like strikes me about you. That's one of my favorite things on social media. And that's like saying a lot because it takes a lot for me to like and care about. Yes.
It's true.
Yes, Anna's seal of approval.
She doesn't get on much.
Sometimes I have to be forced with a crowbar to participate. I'll be the first to admit it.
I'm the one forcing.
That's awesome.
Oh my gosh. It's so true though. And yes, you do have a legit podcast. I like that you said that. It's so telling, right? Because it's like sometimes when we do things ourselves, it's like, is this legit? And like, I can attest, yes, your podcast is very, very legit.
It's legit.
So it sounds like you have so many moving parts. Can you tell us a little bit about how all this started or how it came together and how this vision was kind of manifested in your life?
Yes. Okay, so let's rewind the clock. Every time I tell the story, I have to remember, like, how many years has it been? I think it's been about 8, going on almost 9 years now. I found myself in this position, and I'm sure kind of anybody listening can have a moment of recognition in themselves with this, of like, that moment when you look at yourself in the mirror and you have this moment where you go, what happened? Who am I? You know, like for me, I was in a marriage that was dysfunctional marriage. I'd gotten married at 20 years old. And I mean, you know, like I said, a good Southern gal. And I went through this series of totally denying myself and really losing my voice. I had gained about 80 pounds. I was really sick with endometriosis and had pretty debilitating anxiety and depression, like to the point where I had such a hard time like leaving my house. Like it was, you know, like self-quarantining, you know, 9 years ago. And I was like experiencing so many panic attacks and I was in a lot of physical pain. And so I was on just every medication you could imagine, pain meds, anxiety meds, sleep meds, nausea meds, like everything. So there was kind of this moment. I mean, I think it's a series of moments, but I did have this moment where I looked at myself in the eyes and I was like, what happened? Like, where'd you go? You know, like, I think I was like 26 at the time and I didn't recognize myself. My eyes were the same, but everything else was different. And it was a wow moment. It was like, an awakening. I mean, it really was sort of that come to Jesus moment, as we say here in the South, where it was like, all right, let's check yourself. And at that moment, I realized something has got to give. You know, there's got to be more to life than this. Like, if I'm 26 and I'm this miserable, then what's the rest of my life going to look like? And I remember going on Amazon and I ordered like 20 self-help, self-development books. And that wasn't like a normal thing for me. And so I just thought, somebody's been through this before. There's got to be answers out there. And so I ordered, like in desperation, all of these books. And I jokingly say that I put myself through like Mary's self-development school. And I was just like a sponge, you know, like at the beginning of this journey. It's like I wanted to learn everything that I could. And that journey took several years of unbecoming and then becoming, and kind of coming back home to my truest self, coming back home to who I had lost, you know, years before inside of this relationship, and just the struggle of growing up. And I had a lot of trauma that had happened, which I won't get into, but I think that for me, it was like, okay, how can I come back to my own lovability, my own essence, my own soul's calling and self and purpose and destiny. And so little by little, it started with essential oils. Then I started with a farmer's market. Then I went into Kundalini yoga. I became a Kundalini yoga instructor. And I was 240 pounds when I became a yoga instructor. Like I was plus size, should not have, you know, quote unquote, you know, done it. And this was before there was really a curvy body movement.
Yeah.
And then I became a coach. And so it's just sort of, I'm always learning. It's always progressing. But yeah, it really started with that moment of being like, there's got to be more to life than this, and sort of making that soul agreement to choose life over what I had been living.
That's so powerful. Thanks for sharing all that. And now you're able to help other people walk through similar journeys, I would imagine.
Yeah, I think that is one of the elements that makes a good coach, is the ability to empathize based on your own life experience. And I feel like I've been through so much. I mean, whether it was, the death of a nephew that I was the caretaker of early on, whether it was my divorce, whether it was all the body image stuff, the deep anxiety, the physical pain. It's like when I get on calls with my clients and it inevitably happens every time. They're like, I don't know if this is okay to like share this much, and I'm like, girl, not only have I heard it all, I have experienced so much that I think one of my like strengths as a coach is coming from a place of non-judgment and inviting others to treat themselves with that same compassion and tenderness of like, life is hard, like, let's not pretend that it's just this easy ride. Like, life is hard and this is a safe place. And so, yeah, that empathy, it's like, I look back at what I've been through and I think it was, over and over again, some of the hardest stuff that I've ever been through. And yet that has cultivated deep empathy that I'm so grateful for, that I can offer, people that I love.
Yeah, that's so important.
I'm thinking about people who maybe don't realize that their own life experience is valuable to help other people. But I was thinking as you were talking about that, you ordered 20 books, you put yourself through the paces, you basically built a self-development course for yourself and where you dominated it. It's awesome. And it sounds like it was super helpful. So why coach people or share yourself and your life with people instead of just recommending those 20 books to them? You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
Because a lot of people, I think, don't realize they have something to offer beyond the things that helped them because they have their own experience. So I don't know. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, I love that question. And I think that this is the invitation I feel like that we all have. And I honestly think this is why we experience challenges in our lives and contrast. Like when I say contrast, I mean feeling and experiencing difficult emotions or difficult experiences in contrast with just being happy all the time or just having everything be easy all the time. I think that the gift in that, the silver lining of all of the challenges and all of the things that are hard, is the ability to just be a little bit further ahead than somebody. And you can help point out roadblocks, speed bumps, potholes that people might fall into. And I think that my nature is to learn the hard way. Like I've always been like that since a little kid. It's like,
raise your hand if your nature is to learn the hard way.
Yeah, like all of us, right? Yeah. Totally.
Like,
no.
Katie, you're like, no.
I'm resisting that.
Oh my gosh. Well, I was like so just stubborn. And I think that I'm an Aquarius. I am a kind of a go before, sort of that forge the path kind of personality anyways. And so for me, I think that it's like, okay, I've been through this road that I know you're about to travel on. And let me show you what I've learned. And I had to go at it alone, or I shouldn't say I had to. I guess I chose to because it was just sort of my default response was just to learn as much as I could by myself. But there was a point where I hired a coach. Like I had kind of had enough awakening, and I worked with the most amazing coach at the beginning of this journey. And she was, a huge resource for me. And I attribute so much of my ability to quickly move forward and create an insanely successful business because of her, because she had gone through what I hadn't seen yet and hadn't had the resources or the tools for yet. And she gave those to me. And I just think I think because of that experience, I want to offer that to other people. And I think that doesn't mean everybody needs to be a coach or everybody needs to be a therapist. I mean, this is like even just being able to hold space for somebody especially right now, like just being able to listen and cultivating, like, again, that spirit of non-judgment, of creating space and allowing people to kind of work things out in your presence. That's what we do with our dearest friends. That's what we do with our partners. And so to me, it's like, because we are wired for connection, wired for community, this is the community response. It's like we all bring the things that we have to offer to the table to lighten someone's load, to ease their burden. And that's what makes it like doable. That's what makes it not so miserable. And when we can get out of that isolation and come together and say, listen, I'm going to lift you up here. And somebody else says, well, I've got this to bring to the table. I can lift you up there. That it's like that kind of community makes everything feel manageable. And I think that's like what we can all do in different ways, sort of bring that to the table to lighten the burden for someone else.
That's a really great point. And as you were talking, one thing that stood out to me, you didn't say this exactly, but it's something I've thought about a lot. If we're on this journey by ourselves, we'll probably get there eventually. Like we'll figure it out. But how much faster, can we kind of get there with the help of other people? And so that's really beautiful.
Oh, yeah. I mean, if you think about the gift of reading a book and having the step-by-step process to something, you don't have to figure it out the hard way. I mean, it's spelled out right there in front of you. And I think that that's what I feel like as a coach I get to do, is to say, listen, here's what I know are sort of universal truths, and let's help you move through them without you having to expend the energy and exhaust yourself to kind of figuring it out the hard way. It makes it so much quicker for people to experience transformation when there's a guide. And you look at history, and if you think about the life of Jesus, you think about the life of Buddha, you think about, any spiritual teacher or master, they've demonstrated this for us. They have shown us what it looks like to have someone guide us through the process. We aren't meant to figure it out by ourselves. And I think that is like the deepest compassion. If you think about like a master, a teacher, a deity of some kind, it just the life of that, of the sacrifice of like, I will go ahead so that I can show you the way. And to me, that's compassionate love. That is deep love of wanting to, we still have to go through it. We still got to struggle through it, but it does ease the burden a little bit. And so, we can see that modeled throughout history. And to me, who doesn't want to go like a little bit quicker and easier down the path?
Right.
Of course. Yes. No, that's such good advice. I wanted to ask you about what's going on in your world right now. So for people who may not know, Nashville got hit really hard with a couple of devastating tornadoes. And then just a couple weeks later, here we all are in quarantine.
Yep.
What's that been like for you and your community?
Yeah, it has been intense. I mean, I think anybody just with the, COVID-19 stuff can relate to this, even without the tornado, of just sort of having everything that feels normal taken away. And, at the beginning with the tornado, this was before we were in lockdown. It was 3 blocks from my house, and it was terrifying. And then that night was terrifying. And I woke up and I drove down the road, and just the destruction. I mean, it looks like the end of the world. It looks like bombs went off. Everything is just destroyed. Trees are uprooted. Steeples came off churches. I mean, it's just, you can't even understand it with your naked eye. Like, I was just walking in total shock of like, I just ate there last night. I get my coffee at this place. This is where I go to brunch, every weekend. And the beautiful thing about all of that was the community came together like you would never believe. It was like, in Tennessee, we're known as the volunteer state. And
Go Vols!
Go Vols, baby. It was incredible to see how people were pulling together. I mean, like every race, every age, every religion, everybody was coming together to help. I mean, it was like, and I mean, I think the day that I volunteered on the weekend, it was like 20,000 people had, signed up to volunteer where I was at, in North Nashville. And that is just like, when do we ever do that? Like really anymore, where we come together and we support one another in that, like, just, I mean, most basic way.
On that scale, yeah.
Yeah.
Especially.
It was so amazing, and just the how quick everybody rose to the occasion. And then we got hit with Corona, and it was weird because it's like I'm driving down my streets and it looks like the end of the world. And now collectively, energetically on the planet, it feels like the end of the world. And so that messes with your head. I mean, that is one of those things where there were some dark nights of the soul for me, of trying to get out of that lizard brain, survival brain, trauma response, stress response, where you're like cortisol is all high, or adrenaline's pumping, couldn't sleep, to going, okay, let's remember the tools that I have. Let's remember that I have been training for this for the past 8 years, of like, I've got the tools. And it doesn't mean that the tools are easy. We still have to use the tools. We have to pick up the hammer. And when I say tools, I mean things like mindfulness practices, meditation, attuning to and aligning to the highest vibration of love and light, calling in love, calling in light, praying like I've never prayed before, centering myself, doing my yoga practice, all of these things that kind of have felt like a luxury and now are like complete necessity to stay sane. And I'm feeling like you can see people in the community doing that. And then you can see people who are in the fear trance and then in the fear loop. And there's a lot of that as well. And so going outside, going to the grocery store, I think everybody can relate to this. It's heavy. I mean, it's a palpable energy that is circulating. And so I have to come back and be like, all right, my job is to be a faith keeper. That is my role in this, is to be a faith keeper, to be a holder of the light, and to over and over again come back to source, come back to, and that means higher power, whatever that is for you, but like come back to source, where you get your wisdom, your intuition, your energy. So it's strange, and yet, I don't know, for me, I feel grounded right now in it. But it's taken me, a couple weeks to get to that place.
Well, I think there's an adjustment period for everyone, because everybody has the lizard brain. So everybody has to kick into fight or flight kind of first. And then, depending on your resources, your internal resources, everyone's kind of rolling over into a different response than survival, like at a different pace.
Yes. Well, and I think because for each of us, this is kicking up our own individual primal fears. Like what it is that is like, for me, my primal fear is ending up alone, being abandoned. And so for others, it might not having what they need, going hungry. For others, it could be, abuse. It could be, loss of freedom, loss of power. And so it's triggering our most primal fears in each of us, given our lifespan, our history, the traumas, old traumas that we've already been through. It's like we're having to grasp and look at things that we've been very skilled at ignoring, denying, covering up, coping from. It's like now we are face to face with the inner current, below the surface, and we can't use what we typically would to distract ourselves any longer. It's like we can't go to movies, we can't go to sports games, we can't be in a loud restaurant, all those different things. It's like we are
can't
alone.
Get away from ourselves.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And I have a lot of compassion for that, because that's a lot, and Anna, kind of to speak to what you just said, like there's a grieving process that's taking place. There is a loss. And you think about the stages of grief and denial and anger. And then eventually, I'm skipping some of these steps, but eventually there's bargaining. Yep.
Yeah.
And then eventually you get to acceptance. And I think that we all move through the stages of grief in different ways and at different paces, given what we're having to face right now. And I think what I've been trying to teach my audience and my clients is how can you meet this with acceptance, neutrality, and tenderness, and like the deepest, like loving, compassionate energy for yourself. Because it's a lot for everybody. And what we don't need is more of the shoulds, more of the shame, more of the comparison. Well, so-and-so's, they're fine. I should be fine. Or so-and-so is building this part of their business and I can't even get off the couch. Or so-and-so is, losing their mind and I'm like in joy. It's like there's all kinds of different kinds of comparison, and just coming back to ourselves and checking in with how we need to be moving through this personally.
Yeah, that's such great advice, especially because something that stood out to me that you said was, you've done this for 8 years and it's your job essentially, and you still found it a struggle,
Yeah.
So I just want to say to people who are new to all this, are new to their internal world and internal safety, and it's okay if you're struggling. It really is. What advice would you maybe give to someone who does find themselves in that boat right now of just not knowing what to even do next?
The first thing is, like, I'm just picturing this, whoever this person is, and I just think grace is the first word that comes to my mind of like, none of us know how to do this. I mean, you know what I mean? Like, none of us have experienced this, and to think that we know how to go through it is unrealistic. I mean, it's like, yeah. I think that creates a lot of judgment and shame that we should somehow know how to do this, whether or not you have tools or you've, been working at this for 8 years or you started, 3 weeks ago. We don't know. I mean, it's like we've got our tool bag, but we don't know if our tools are going to work for this, situation.
Totally.
And so I think the first piece of this is deep grace of like, we are navigating the best that we know how. And it's swimming upstream right now. And it is exhausting. It's collectively exhausting. It's personally exhausting. And I just think that there is no right way to go through this. There is no way that you should be having to go through this other than what you're experiencing. So the first, and I teach a lot around mindfulness. And the first step of mindfulness is pausing and recognizing that you're having a response in the first place. It's like pausing to breathe and recognizing I'm feeling something right now. Can I identify what that feeling is? What am I feeling? What is asking for my highest attention right now? And that is a state of presence. It's kind of like disconnecting from the news, disconnecting from the social media if you need to, or whatever might be fueling the fear monster, and pausing to breathe and to check in. How am I feeling? How am I doing? And giving yourself permission to be radically honest. And it's scary, but when we can be honest, we can move through it. When we're kind of in this resistance or denial, that's where we have a lot of our suffering. And so it's like, I'm really scared right now, or I'm really fearful, or I have a lot of anxiety right now. I'm nervous about this, or I'm scared. And it's almost like giving ourselves permission to be wherever we are. And then to meet that, and I say this for everybody listening, like, to meet yourself and this fear and this anxiety and in this state of maybe disillusionment or hopelessness or loneliness with compassion. Because that part of ourselves that is feeling afraid needs comforted, needs validated, needs to be seen and heard, and to know that it's okay to be that way. And I think that there's other tools to kind of work through it. But I think the first piece of this is acknowledging where we are and bringing like the biggest, hugest doses of tenderness and compassion and love to the mix of like, you're okay, baby. It's like, I think about this of like talking to myself like a little girl who's really scared. Like, it's okay, baby. I know you're scared. I've got you. And there's a lot of self-talk in myself right now of like, you're okay. I got you. We're going to get through this. I know it's scary. It's okay to be scared. You're okay. We're together. Like there's just like this tenderness that for me it really is the answer. I mean, it's like, as cliche as it is, love is the answer. I mean, over and over again.
That's so beautiful. I don't know about you all. I've spent a little less time on social media lately because there's a lot. I mean, for one, there's a lot of fear. Number two, there's just a lot of people, trying to give answers, I think is the word I'm looking for. It's like, use this time to do this, use this time to do this, use this time. And that's great. And I definitely think there's room for all of it. But I think I have to kind of look at that as like suggestions, right? Like, okay, that is going to work for some people, right? But it might not work for me, And I just love what you're saying about giving yourself grace and responding to that out of tenderness, because the truth is nobody has the answers. Like literally nobody knows when this is going to be over. Nobody knows what's going to fix it. And like, how else can you respond when you don't have the answers, except for love? I really appreciate that.
It is interesting. I mean, all of the conversations that are happening right now online. And I think you're so right, Katie. Like there are so many suggestions of the quote unquote right way of going through this. Like you need to be super productive. You need to be able to create something amazing, whether that's create a new album, whether that is write a book, whether that is create a course, anything that you might do as an entrepreneur. Now is the time. And if you're not doing that, then you're wasting this. And I think that that makes me sad because on one hand, I mean, I'm like, great. Like if you are in a space where you've got some reserve of energy, some reserve of creativity, finally some quiet and some space, then by all means, like go for that. And this is so new that for most of us, we are trying to find our bearings and we don't know what to do. Like we're trying to figure out, how do I get my stimulus check? How do I bring in a new client? How do I make sure that I'm going to eat next month when this is probably still going on? How do I not lose my freaking mind because my kids are around me 24/7? Like we're having to create a new normal and to expect that we would be able to do that within 2 weeks' time.
Yeah.
Again, it's like unrealistic. And I think that is the old paradigm. That is the old Western way that I think is really being called to be examined right now and being challenged right now. And I think being reset. And it's like interesting to see how much of us want to hold on to that old way of do, create, achieve. And it's like, let's slow down and check in. And that is, number one, a trauma response for a lot of people, right? If I keep moving, I won't have to address my fear. If I keep, doing what I've always done, I can avoid the pain. So I think that can be a trauma response. And so to me, the invitation is just to take a pause. I mean, like I said, I've been highly productive during this time, and that's my nature. I'm a Enneagram 2 with a 3 wing, and that's my go-to. But I also know that that's also a coping mechanism for me too. If I stay involved in work, if I feel like I have purpose, if I'm achieving something every day, I feel healthier and more sane. And so I'm having to take that pause myself and go, wait a minute, is this being motivated out of this need for keeping up with the Joneses, making sure you have something to show at the end of this? Or is this really from an intuitive place that's being inspired and being God-breathed for this moment? And I think we all need to be asking that question, sort of like higher power, what is this time for me right now? Is it a time to rest? Is it a time to heal? Is it a time to create? And that, I think we have to give ourselves permission that answer is going to be different for every single one of us.
I love that. And I want to underscore that even more, that the most important thing is asking that question, not having an expectation for what the answer is.
Yeah.
I think it's really awesome and powerful that you describe yourself as a faith keeper, because And this is, this is really interesting to me because this interview is so timely, number one, for what's happening right now in our collective world. But also every bit of this applies to the other ways that we're typically talking about doing scary things, right? Where we're typically talking about going after a passion or giving yourself permission to start something or try something that you've always dreamed of that you're afraid to do. And that kind of stuff, like all of this applies to both. And I think it's so interesting that you're calling yourself a faith keeper, because whether we're talking about, the quarantine world we're living in now or the scary thing that we want to pursue or both, faith is such an important component. And I think fear tells us, that if we have faith, we're going to end up being the fool in the end. We're not going to be ready for what's coming. We're going to be blindsided by something. And I just love the idea of being a faith keeper, right? Somebody who's holding up the light and saying, I'm going to keep having faith even though things feel more uncertain than ever. Because, we stand to gain a lot by having faith. We're not just going to end up the fool every time. And it's hard to believe that when things feel so uncertain. What do you see as the role of faith during this time, kind of no matter where you are in your response, whether you're still in survival or if you're trying to pause and recognize where you are, or if you're, trying to roll over into a chosen response, like where does faith fit in with all of that?
Yeah. I love that we're having this conversation because this is the work.
Yeah.
The faith is the work. I mean, it's like the scariest thing. As you were sharing that, of just like the feeling like we're going to be made the fool. I just thought, gosh, that is the deep wound, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like that is the deep wound, the collective deep wound of like, I don't want to be the idiot who hoped in something and then it didn't turn out. And I think we've probably all had that experience. But I just think that the alternative is we are paralyzed by fear. The alternative is that we are small and that nothing changes and that we limit our resourcefulness, our creativity, our capacity to love on others, our capacity to do something that is really purposeful and meaningful in the world. I mean, I know you guys talk about this all the time. And I was on a walk the other day and with one of my safe people, it's like, all right, I've got like 2 safe people that I'm willing to see that I know that, are single and they're not going out and shaking hands. And
so you mean safe, like that safe. I gotcha.
Your quarantine teammate.
Safe. Okay.
Yeah.
But also, they are also my safe people, like emotionally as well.
Right. That's convenient. They're the same people.
Yeah, the same people. So I was on a walk with one of my dually safe people, and we were just talking about holding the light, like being the ones that are holding the light for others right now. And my friend said, she goes, you know what the truth is? Like, if I'm delusional, I'd rather be delusional. Like if I am in a spot where I am banking on this turning out better than it even could be, that it even exceeding my wildest expectations, that yes, this is hard and this is challenging, but what's on the other side of this is a rebirth. Like we are birthing something that is, if we disconnect from the corona thing and we think about just like stepping into who we were made to be, it's like, walking into this place where it's like, oh my God, this is what I was created for. And there's more abundance, there's deeper fulfillment, there's more joy available in that place. It's like, I would rather put my bet on that, because otherwise, if I don't, I am going to be in a state of misery, a state of hopelessness, a state of, there is a true mental health cost to playing small, to believing in the worst case scenario, believing that we don't have what it takes to rise up to the occasion. I would rather bet on myself. I would rather bet on humanity. I would rather bet on us coming out of all of this better and healthier than when we started. And that sounds like a pie in the sky, my head is in the clouds kind of way of looking at it. And believe me, I'm not in the place of like, everything is rainbows and butterflies. Believe me, I'm a very honest person of like, no, this sucks.
Right. Well, on the other hand, I've heard you say over and over, and I think that this is not a contradiction at all, but you've said over and over, like, but that's an unrealistic expectation. You know, expecting ourselves to just like magically arrive at rainbows and butterflies. And, you know, like there's room for both, and there's a balance of like, how do you set sort of healthy expectations, and how do you not just like play small, right?
Right, exactly. I mean, I think there's like, it's what we're choosing to focus on. And I know that for myself, it's like, I truly believe that we are fully resourceful. What I keep saying to myself, and I think about my business, you know, and I've been thinking a lot about, okay, how do I need to pivot in my business right now? What do I need to create right now so that I can make sure that, you know, I'm putting food on my table and paying my bills and all those things. And I've been saying, I don't have any freaking clue, but I know I will figure it out. And I am resourceful. I will figure it out. I've figured out so many things in my lifetime, you know, and I believe that in every one of my clients. I believe that with our world right now, that we will figure this out. And yes, it's hard. Yes, it's unrealistic to expect us to go through this in perfection. It's messy. It is so messy. And yet, as a faith keeper, I am looking at, there is always light at the end of the tunnel. Love always wins. That I can hook my, what does it say?
Hang your hat.
Hang my hat. There it is. I can hang my hat on that.
You can hook your umbrella right on that.
Yeah, totally. It's like, because otherwise,
Yeah,
I'm going to go into a state of apathy. Who cares? Why do I even try?
exactly.
And that's just like from a real basic common sense place. That doesn't feel good. That's not an enjoyable existence. And you know what? There is pain and pleasure in this world, but I would rather bank on, you know, being able to say, you know what? There is joy that I can experience throughout the midst of all of this. And there is hope. There is always hope. We've seen this through history over and over again. People get through the hardest things that we could ever be thrown. It's like we have 100% success rate of surviving, of adapting, of you know, evolving. And I'm going to choose to focus on that and know that through my own, you know, resourcefulness, from aligning to source, we got this.
I love that. We do got this.
Sounds a lot like creativity.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Resourcefulness, I love that word. We're over here constantly harping on creativity, which is just another word for problem solving. And so one thing that I've loved seeing is people are scrambling, that's for sure, but they're coming up with solutions, you know? And I have to believe, like you're saying, I choose to believe that it's going to be more beautiful in the end because of that. And that's exciting.
Yeah. And that's not to pretend that it's like being undone to become. That we are being undone, and it hurts.
Yeah.
It's uncomfortable. It is tragic. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like when anything is undone, it's not pleasant.
Right.
And so we are being undone. And yet, and you think about the birthing process, like the minute that somebody goes into labor, I mean, it's like, you know, it's ahead. A lot of pain, a lot of sacrifice. And then you get the baby at the end. There is the baby at the end of this. I don't know what that is. I think it's really different for every person. But I think that there is a becoming. There is a birthing that's happening. And I'm ready to see that fat little cheeky baby.
That little chunk.
That's so good.
Totally.
And I just want to point out that most people that go through that experience willingly do it again. You know, there's not a ton of people with just one kid out there. Just saying.
So true.
Just saying. So it must be worth it. I wouldn't know.
Totally.
Oh, that's so cool. Let me ask you a question just to change things up just a bit. Somebody asked me this the other day. And it really made me think, and I'm curious how you'll respond as well. So I'll ask you. But they said, with what you do and with the work you're doing and the advice you're giving people, how does your imposter syndrome come up in this time? Or does it?
It's so funny you say that, because I am having to face that in some ways. I mean, I think first I'll say I'm really grateful that my work creates space and room to be human. And that's sort of like one of the tenets that I teach often, is that we have permission to be human, which means we are allowed to be imperfect human beings having an emotional experience. And I think that the imposter syndrome for me right now is, and always is for me, kind of like over positivity, like almost saying like, well, follow me because I've got the answers, kind of exactly what you were talking about earlier about sort of the social media stuff. And I'm grateful for the awareness of that inside of myself so that I can catch it and really ask myself, wait a second, is this ego here or is this soul? Am I pretending so that people think that I'm somebody to rely on, or do I really know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it one of those things where like, am I a helpful voice in this situation, or do I need to shut up and listen? And so it's like, I think for me, it's that challenge of being the expert in an area where nobody's an expert, and having to kind of call myself out on that and say, you know what? First, there shouldn't be any expectation to be the expert. Even though I'm a coach, even though this is the work that I do, I also don't have it fully figured out. And so being okay with that fact, and recognizing that none of us have it figured out. So there's a lot of like gut checking for me right now that's happening.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that and letting me ask you that. I was just curious your thoughts, because that is something we talk about a lot on the show as something that holds people back, obviously.
Yeah.
Everybody experiences it to some degree. And I think what you're sharing is such a healthy version of that, outlook of that, where it's like, yeah, of course, like we're never going to have all the answers, but that shouldn't keep us from sharing like what we do know and helping other people with that. That's really great.
Totally. Well, it's almost like, have you ever had that feeling where you've gone to your therapist and somehow you figure something out about their like personal life, and it's like, a crapshoot, and you're like, wait, but they're my therapist. They're supposed to like be like the healthiest person, and their life is like more in shambles than like your own. And I've been through that with multiple therapists. Or you have like I know that I have a coach that I've worked with before, and she had a difficult personal situation, and I saw like, an unbecoming response, in a moment of just the tragic stuff that she was going through. And you're like, oh yeah, it's kind of like, seeing your teacher out in the grocery store. Like we're all human.
Wait a minute. Yeah.
Like none of us are meant to have it figured out. And whether you're a coach, whether you are, whatever it is, your version of that, where you think you're supposed to know it all, we don't have to know it all, but we can still lead people, share with people, guide people, even in our weakness, even in our brokenness, even in our own human experience. We still have something to offer. And that's so redemptive to me. I mean, that's just like, oh, yes, okay. Like I don't have to be perfect before I offer what I have to the world.
Amen.
Yeah.
That is really good news, right? For all of us.
It is. Thank God.
I have both been that therapist and been that client. So I feel you from every direction on that.
I love it. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I also always find myself wanting to know my therapist personally, right? Like I'm always like trying to dig and figure, and it's like, why won't you talk to me? Be my friend. I get it. Boundaries are hard.
Boundaries are hard.
I know.
I'll just take a moment to appreciate how boundaries are hard. And
boundaries.
Sidebar, how many healthy boundaries have probably gone awry in the wake of quarantine and us having to totally retool how we engage in our relationships. That has been super hard.
Oh man, I've been telling that to so many people. Like, take a look at the boundaries, because our knee-jerk reaction is to go back into toxic relationships. I've been with my boyfriend for 4 years. I had an ex text me out of the blue this past week, and I was like, "Oh, here we go. Everybody's,
everybody's lonely. Everybody's at home by themselves."
I know, and I'm like, "Okay, let's just take a moment."
Yes, that's maybe worth noting too. Instead of taking inventory of your entire life and all your past decisions and all of your mistakes and all of whatever, try and be in the moment. Like, try and be present. You don't need to text your ex from 6 years ago just because they came up.
Don't go back to toxic people.
You thought through every thought and decision you've ever had in your mind. Like, don't do it.
Lord.
Please.
Oh my gosh, that is so funny. Well, tell us, Mary, is there something that you're working on right now that is new and exciting for you, or maybe a little scary, or what do you have going on?
Yes, new and scary. Okay. I am launching a membership site in April.
Yay!
And because I recognize that for me, like, I'm a high-level coach, and not everybody can afford to work with me one-on-one, but I love all of my other people that follow me, and decided to create an option that would be affordable to the masses and support people on this self-development journey, and get a lot of resources like embodiment practices, guided meditations, worksheets, and just a bunch of other resources kind of all wrapped up into one. And I've never done anything like that before. Even the technology piece of it is like super intimidating to me. And then also I have a high need for variety in my life. And so part of what scares me is like the consistency of that, like showing up in my own commitment. And I'm really working this year on discipline for myself. And so it's one of those like lean into the discomfort moments, because I know from a broader sense it will serve a lot more people, and that's what I'm here to do. And so I'm really excited about that. And it's like, ooh, like, will people get it? Like, will people want to join the membership? How do I even freaking do this thing? And again, it's like, I'm fully resourceful. I know people, I can ask. There's a thing called Google. I'll figure it out.
Thank God.
But yeah, I know, thank God. But that's what I'm like really excited about, and also like, ooh.
Yeah. Oh, that's so fun. How exciting.
To piggyback off what you were just saying, I find that I feel very similar things to what you just described. Anytime I'm starting a new project where it's like, here's a bunch of blood, sweat, and tears before the thing shows whether it's kind of a worthy endeavor or not, or before I can see when there will be any kind of outcomes from it that I imagine, and I think a lot of the nature of a lot of people's work right now is probably like that, where they're like, well, I'm just doing everything I can do and trying to put this thing together and hoping for the best. Is there any specific advice you have for that?
I just think that, you hit on such a great point. I think that it really is like, in this arena, there oftentimes is not instant gratification. And I think we have been sold a lie that's like, your $100,000 launch.
Oh my gosh. Don't get me started.
I know. Right. And I just think that like, and again, that may be true for some people. I don't want to discount that, right? Yeah. That's a possibility out there. I'm very much an abundance thinker, have at it. And I also think that is probably more true for most of us, is that consistency is the name of the game. Like, that's something that I had to learn the hard way in my business. But consistency is where we see the profit follow. And if oftentimes it's like, I'm a quick start, I am an idea person, I love starting projects, not so much following through and finishing projects. So I'm always like, ooh, let me launch this. Oh, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. And you don't get to reap the benefits when you come from that place. It's like, I tell my clients, I'm like, you got to marry one thing for like 2 years before you really reap the benefits. It's kind of like normal business in a lot of ways. Like, you got to say the same thing over and over again for a couple years before anybody is really taking notice. And I think that that's so much of what this game is like, are you willing to stick it out? and do what's hard and stay consistent. And there is a tipping point at some point, but it's usually not in the first launch. And that sucks, but it's like I just keep thinking the prayer, God, guide me to my excellence. And in everything that I do, God, guide me to my excellence. Even if this is 10 people that look at this, God, guide me to my excellence. And that kind of approach to it, to me, pays off in the long run. But it's often takes a little while to get to that place, I think.
Yeah. That's great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Such a good reminder. It really is. Here's something I talk about a lot with my clients. It's like we all see the examples of it working out, right? But we don't know how long it took or how much work it took. You know, we see...
Or how many launches.
Yes, exactly. Like, you know, just because somebody has like a New York Times bestseller doesn't mean they haven't been at this for 20 years. You know, you just heard about them for the first time, but that doesn't mean anything. And so what I'm constantly telling people is like, if you're not willing to do it for 5 years or for 10 years or for the rest of your life, then let's maybe not bother, you know, let's find something that you are willing to stick with, because it might take that long and you have to be okay with that, you know, when you start.
Yeah. That's such good advice.
If there's somebody who maybe for this special coronavirus edition of our podcast, if there's somebody who is struggling to do the scary thing of getting through their day-to-day right now, or if there's somebody who is struggling to envision that thing they have a passion for in this context, or is afraid to take the first step, or doesn't know what to do about the next step, or isn't certain of their own resourcefulness, any of those things, what would you say to somebody who is on the cusp of a scary thing right now?
I think that what I would advise people is to drop into their heart. And I think that what keeps us moving forward is all of the fear, all of the worst case scenarios, the imposter syndrome, everything that could go wrong. And I think that in those moments, there is some part of us that needs that tenderness, that love, that understanding, that validation, and to drop into the heart. And one easy way that I instruct people to do this is just to put a hand over your heart. And to take 3 deep breaths, closing the eyes, inhaling through the nose, and then exhaling through the mouth 3 times, kind of almost like slowing down the mental chatter and coming back to the heart to connect with that part of yourself that has the answers, that is incredibly wise and intuitive, who already knows the way forward, the way through, the way beyond, and to deeply take that necessary pause and ask yourself, what do I need? What do I need? Because oftentimes what we need to make the next move is something like we need some self-care. We need to reach out to a friend. We need more clarity around something. We need permission to move forward. We need to kind of eradicate an old limiting belief that told us we're unworthy, we're not good enough to do this thing. And that needs attention. That needs loving kindness. And so to me, it's dropping into the heart, pausing with breath, and asking ourselves, what do I need? And we will be shown the answer. I truly believe that. We will know when we sit in the pause.
Brilliant.
Yeah. Such good advice.
Doesn't matter how badly I asked the question. Doesn't matter.
It was great. You did a great job.
That's such good advice. And we're just so appreciative of your time today. Thank you for sharing with our listeners. We are going to put all of your resources in our show notes because you put out so much good content and I want people to be able to have access to that.
Yeah.
But Mary, thank you so much for all you're doing.
Y'all, thank you so much. And thank you for everything that you guys are doing. And thank you for having me on. I've loved it.
Yes. Let's all just keep showing up with what we've got.
Yeah, yes.
Thanks for joining us today on the Doing Scary Things podcast. If you liked today's episode, please subscribe so you never miss one, leave a review, and share it with a friend. You can find our new album, Whisper, under the band name Jasper and Jade. Until next time.
Sometimes it's not about figuring it out, right, Mary?
No.
Right.
It's about editing it out.
That's right. It's about editing it out. Oh my God, it's so true.
That's awesome.
Sorry, Anna.
It's okay. That was a golden blooper. I'm already going to tell you.